The debt is the threat. Inflation is the threat. That's what the president should be concerned about. Instead of figuring out ways to spend even more money and go deeper into debt, why don't we try to figure out how to cut spending? The president, and I mentioned this on a prior podcast, said that Americans need to be prepared to make sacrifices, that we have to sacrifice, for this greater good. Right? We have to, suck it up and pay higher gas prices because it's worth it in the long run because we're going to defeat Iran. Well, instead of focusing on defeating an enemy that really doesn't represent that much of a threat to us, why don't we focus on what does, the debt itself? And we're making the debt crisis worse by fighting a war that we didn't need to fight. And now we're borrowing even more money that we didn't need to borrow. So the sacrifice that he should be asking Americans to make is to accept less government, to accept reductions in government benefits. That's the sacrifice. That would be a sacrifice worth making because that's a real payoff. We can have real prosperity if we can shrink the size of the government. Instead, we're making government bigger. We're making the military bigger. We're spending more money. We're making the deficits bigger to finance this war. So I thought that comment was very striking. Nobody really talks about it. The whole rest of the interview, I don't really believe a word that comes out of this guy's mouth. In fact, I don't believe anything that anybody in the Trump administration says. Because I think either that they got to know that Trump is lying. So if they repeat the lies, then they're lying too. And of course, Trump is talking about the war all the time. And I wish I could believe the things that he says. And it's not that I just believe the stuff that the Iranians say. I don't trust them either. But I take everything that Trump says with a grain of salt. And so should everybody else. So should the media. So should the markets. Just because Trump says something does not mean it's true. Because most of the stuff that he says, I know is a lie. When Trump talks about the economy, I know he's lying. All the stuff that he says is happening. It's not happening. He's making stuff up. He's misrepresenting stuff. So if he does that when he talks about the economy, tariffs, inflation, his accomplishments, all the other stuff that Donald Trump routinely lies about. And he lies about the same stuff over and over and over again, trying to convince himself that the lies are true. But because he has such a track record of lying, how the hell can I believe him when he starts to talk about what's happening with Iran, when he talks about why we're having a war, when he talks about what's happening during the war, how the war is going? How can I believe him? I can't. I'd like to be able to believe the president, but how do you believe somebody that's told so many lies? You destroy your own credibility. So I don't know why anybody even pays attention. Why the media? Why the markets? Why the markets pay attention to what the president says? But they do, and that may be one of the main reasons that the president says things is because he's intending to manipulate the market. And in the meantime, again, don't forget, buy some gold and silver before we rush up to new highs, before the markets realize that win or lose this war, gold's going higher. And the longer it continues, the more bullish it is, despite how the markets are trading. And these gold stocks, they are the best buys. They came down dramatically as a result of this. All of this is noise. None of this is going to matter to the massive profits these gold mining companies are going to be earning for years and years to come. Even though gold prices have come down, they're still $4,500 an ounce. Yes, silver's come down. It's $70. These are great prices, and these mining companies are going to make a fortune, and they're going to make even more money because the market is going to move to new highs, and I think before the end of the year. So this is just a very small bump in a long road. We've got a long way to go. And I think the destination, again, is going to make the bumpy ride worth it. This is ridiculous when it comes to gold. This shows you how liquidity-driven everything happens to be right now in this massive bubble that the Fed has inflated. Gold goes down when the war gets escalated, but it goes up when it gets de-escalated, which is the opposite of what you would think. You would think that when the war looks like it's going to be bigger and last longer and be more disruptive, you should want to buy gold. But if it looks like the war is over, you'd want to sell it. But the opposite is happening. The longer it looks like the war is going to continue, the more people are selling gold. If they declared peace tomorrow, the whole war is over, gold would soar. That doesn't even seem to make any sense. And, part of it, too, is linked to the idea that the longer the war continues, the longer we're going to have to wait for the Fed to cut rate. And that elongated wait for the rate cut, that's what's weighing on gold, which is irrelevant because the entire time the Fed is going to be on hold, inflation is going to be getting worse. And so real interest rates are going to keep going down, even if the Fed holds nominal interest rates the same. And if inflation goes from 3% to 6%, that's better for gold than inflation staying where it is and the Fed cutting. Because what's important for gold is real interest rates. The nominal interest rates at the end of the day don't matter. Even if the Fed raises interest rates to 10%, if inflation is 30%, do 10% inflation interest rates matter? No, you're negative 20%. You would want to buy gold even more aggressively if we had 10% interest rates and 30% inflation. So it's the real rate that is important. And the traders still don't get this. Now, eventually, if the war goes on long enough, this is going to stop. At some point, gold is going to start to go up when the escalation goes up. But we haven't reached that point yet. But I think the pullback, if you look at the pullback to 4,100, that's about 40% retracement of the entire rally. If you measure the rally from the breakout at 2,000, right? That was really where we broke out. So it went from 2,000 to 5,600. A 40% retracement is about 4,100. Now, as we're talking now, and I'm going to get to why this happened, but gold's back above 4,500. So it's already bounced more than 10% from Monday morning's low. But that 40% retracement is exactly the decline that we got. The bull market in gold from 2001 to 2008, that bull market where gold went from under 300 to 1,000, the 40% retracement there was about what we did in between August of 08 and November of 08. During those 4 months, gold pulled back about 35%, which was a little bit bigger than the pullback that we've had so far, although this pullback was quicker. Gold's decline since we started the Iran war, it was a much faster decline than the one that was triggered by the 2008 financial crisis. That's how sharp the decline was. In fact, last week was the worst week gold's had since 1983, so way before the 08 financial crisis. But if you look at the magnitude of the decline relative to the entire bull market, what we've already had in 3 weeks is about the same as what we had in 4 months of the financial crisis. But what's significant is after gold bottomed in November of 2008. Now, the stock market didn't bottom until January, February, or March, I forget, of 09. The stock market fell another 22, 23% after gold bottomed. But after gold bottomed, within 3 years, it tripled. Gold went to 1,900. So if gold does the same thing again, has a 40% retracement, and then triples, gold's over 11,000. Now, I actually think gold's going to go a lot higher than that. I think the fundamentals are a lot better now than they were in 2011. So if gold could triple after a 40% retracement back then, it can certainly do at least that, if not more now, which is why everybody should take advantage of this decline and buy silver. In fact, silver went all the way down below 63. Remember, silver got to 121 or something like that. So almost about a 50% decline in silver from its peak, not a retracement of the rally, but a complete, 50% decline. Silver right now is about 71 and a half. So about $8 higher than it was Monday morning. So better than, again, 10% bounce off of those lows. But I think that it's nuts that we're at war and the fundamentals for gold and silver are better than they've ever been. They were great before the war. They're even better now that we have a war. And I don't care if the war is over. The war is damaging the U.S. economy. Yes, the longer it goes on, the more the damage is going to be. But there's going to be damage even after the war ends. When the war is over, it's not going to be a great thing that we're going to have. I think that Trump is going to promote it as this massive victory, no matter how badly we lose. And not that we lose in a military sense, that Iran defeats us. That's not going to happen. But we can lose in an economic sense. We can lose in a sense that we don't really accomplish anything. In fact, I think Iran knows, the Iranian leaders know that they win the war just by surviving. If the regime is intact at the end of it, then they've won. Because they've stood up to the big American Satan, right? If they're still in power, even if it's different people, if it's the same basic regime, just different players, and who knows what they're going to demand. In fact, if you look, I'm jumping ahead of myself, so I don't even want to get to that.